Hi, this is George Tate. This is the next part of How to Kill a Piano, which, again, if you are just tuning in to this podcast and you missed chapter 1 or the very first episode of this, please go back and listen to that, because this is not the type of podcast that you just kind of jump into and listen to at any point. Although I suppose you can do whatever you want. Who am I to tell you how to live your life? It's yours, after all. But without further ado, this is Chapter 2 of How to Kill a Piano, chapter title, Uncle Charlie. Charlie Safaric wasn't an overly skinny man, yet he wasn't overweight either. He wasn't tall, yet wasn't short. He was what some would call average, though he was far from it. His half-oval frame spectacles often complementing his long face, though he only wore them when reading. He kept his hair cut short and layered in the back, yet long enough to wear behind his ears. Between his dark brown hair and his smooth pale skin, his gray eyes always seemed as warm as the sun. He was always a bit old-fashioned, yet he had a mix of modern thinking. He always was well-kept with a clean shave, always insisting on shaving with a straight razor the old-fashioned way. It was all very romantic, stroking the thin stainless steel razor along the thick strip of brown polyurethane and canvas with a brush soaked in warm water before each shave. His favorite part was twirling the soap into a thick lather with the finest synthetic shaving brush money could buy. He always made sure to keep what he was doing as cruelty-free as possible. This was with as much attention and respect and care of human beings as it was of animals. Each piece of his wardrobe was virtually indistinguishable from the others. On any given day, you'd be likely to find him donning a stripy button-up shirt in a shade of green, gray, blue, or black. This was nearly always complemented with a pair of well-pressed black dress pants. Perhaps Charlie's most distinguished feature of note, if you had met him before my 5th birthday, was the black hat that was something crossed between a derby and a bowler that he wore when he went out. When I turned 5, Charlie decided I should have it. When I put it on for the first time, it hung down around my ears and over my eyes. Charlie would joke that I looked like I had a lot of growing to do. Even though I grew up without a mom and dad, Charlie didn't want me to think of him as my father. He always made a point to stay up front with me and never hid the truth about how he and I came together. It's true. I've been known to embellish our story a little bit when I tell it. Raising me, I always called him Charlie, or Uncle Charlie. Though he could have easily adopted me as his own child and had me call him Dad, we were happy to have each other as we did. He believed in always being open with me. In return, I was almost always open with him. I never felt the lack of parents in my life. Charlie was always enough. He wasn't against collecting stuff, and he had quite the collection. The majority of it was kept where there was the most room in the house, the basement. He collected anything and everything: antique chessboards, baby and wisdom teeth of friends, x-rays of strangers, an impressive array of world globes, balls of yarn of every color imaginable, and even the occasional parking ticket. He framed the best of them, and they hung proudly on the wall in the upstairs hall. He was the most proud of the parking ticket he once received for parking a toy bus in front of the town hall for over 1 month. I think Charlie's most impressive collection, though, had to be his books. Knowledge was his passion, though he rarely developed any technical skill, with the exception of a few conjuring tricks. He hid the impressive library downstairs in the basement of his home. That library would make any librarian jealous. The shelves were made of wood boards stacked between bricks and lined the unfinished basement walls as far as the eye could see. In my mind, it went on forever. I used to believe it made him knowledgeable on almost any topic, and he practically was. I spent a great deal of time there combing through book after book. There were 2 tall-backed antique chairs with faded burgundy cushions that looked like they belonged in a Lewis Carroll novel. We spent a lot of time in those chairs. Between those 2 chairs, there was a small, circular marble-topped table, a reading lamp that cast shadows that seemed to dance on the walls, and a Crosley companion cathedral-style radio. Sometimes, Charlie would dial a station of just static and leave it playing at low level while we worked. The rest of the basement was an organized labyrinth of boxes that weaved in and out between the shelves. When we were down there, the rest of the world disappeared. "Charlie, how do you keep track of everything?" I asked one day while we were weaving in and out of the maze of books. "I have my own system. I arrange the titles by binding, then color, and finally by subject. It just feels more organic to me than by title or author." "But what about these?" I pulled a few books down that didn't seem to fit the system Charlie described. "Sometimes not everything needs a system." "Then how do you know where to find them when you want them?" My fingers danced along the bindings of the books like a stick being dragged along the slots of a fence as I continued to walk between the shelves. "I simply remember where I put them, George." He winked and pulled down a book and tossed it to me. "You might like this one." I looked down at the yellow-colored book in my lap. The cover read, "The Memory Book." "I had the memory of a goldfish before I read that one," Charlie joked. "You know, orange." "But I thought you told me that goldfish have a really great memory." "They do, George. They do." Charlie always told bizarre jokes like this. I didn't get it, but they were probably always brilliant. Uncle Charlie had always been a bit of a loner, but he had a heart that was so full of passion it could turn a demon onto believing in love, if they ever took the time to notice more than themselves. I don't remember Uncle Charlie dating during my time with him. It was the only subject Charlie was hesitant to discuss with me. Anything else, he answered with full disclosure. I asked a lot of questions. He taught me everything from Darwin to Vonnegut, Aristotle to Plato, Corinda to Vernon, and Beethoven to the Beatles. Ironically, Charlie didn't play any musical instruments himself. He did, however, teach me my first magic trick, how to vanish a quarter using simple sleight of hand. He would always tell me that in order to direct people's attention away from where the quarter secretly hid, my entire body had to communicate where I wanted the audience to believe it was. Conjuring, after all, was a full-body sport. We'd take breaks, and Charlie and I'd play chess on one of his incredible antique chessboards. Sometimes, instead of sharing a game, we'd go to the park and fly kites and eat peanut butter and apple sandwiches by the river. Sometimes I'd do my own thing, while Charlie went and did his. We always said that the breaks, in between, were time for the knowledge to steep. Sometimes I imagined that it was as simple as ripping out my favorite pages, passing them to Charlie, who prepared the kettle of freshly heated water. Once in hand, he'd stuff the pages into the kettle, push down the plunger on the French press, and stand behind me. As he carefully removed the oversized hat hanging just over my ears, the top of my skull would be safely carried away with it. He'd steady the kettle with 2 hands and slowly pour the freshly steeped knowledge into my head. "Hold still," I imagined Charlie warning as he'd take one hand off the kettle to gesture. "You have to let it simmer." I can't even feel it, I'd think, while standing there speechless. This paralyzing state of not being able to move my lips to get sound out fascinates me. I'd wait for him to stop pouring, and only then would we sit down over a game of chess and peanut butter and apple sandwiches. Neither of us seemed to find it strange that part of my head was missing, or that steam was slowly pouring out down over my eyebrows as the tea cooled. Of course, in reality, it wasn't anything like that at all, but Charlie did make tea. It wasn't out of the pages of his library, but of chamomile and lemongrass, carefully brewed to a beautiful translucent brown. We never add sugar, as Charlie claimed. It mucked up the purity of things. If any kind of milk was added, it would be almond or soy, stirred into the water prior to heating. On the first of the year, Charlie would always add a little bit of coconut milk instead. This would have been a ritual I would have continued if given the chance. Charlie claimed that this was always the way to make the perfect cup of tea. We'd sit and play chess as we conversed. If I won, it's because Charlie surely let me. When I lost, Charlie never gloated, but always went back to teach me where things went wrong. "Charlie, I'd ask, moving my bishop to the far side of the brass checkered board in front of his rook's pawn, my queen hiding one space behind. "Why do you love chamomile tea so much?" He responded by moving his knight to take my queen's pawn. He could see that he might have a chance to take my rook in one more move. I saw it too, and moved my queen to the center of the board, threatening his rook. He paused and sighed for a moment. It was in a way he usually did when I started to hedge in on a topic he wasn't ready to tell me about. Without thinking, he followed through and took my pawn with his knight. He was now threatening my rook before answering. I fell in love with someone once over a cup of chamomile. She taught me so much about life in such a small window of time. It was a gift, and because I love you, I want to share those gifts with you. Where is she now? Why don't you ever talk about her? I took his rook with my queen. Check, I said. Charlie realized that he was one move away from checkmate and couldn't get out of it. I had obviously distracted him, as he wasn't on his usual winning streak. Well played, said Charlie, changing the subject and tossing me another book. That's another story for another time, and right now, it's time for bed. How to Kill a Piano was produced by yours truly, written by George Tait. That's yours truly. The music, of course, was provided live by yours truly, improvised along with this track specifically created for this purpose. If you liked it, please subscribe. Please share this with your friends. And thank you so much for listening. Thank you so much for spending your time choosing to do this, because your time is the most valuable thing that you have. And it really humbles me that you are willing to take a little bit and give it to this project. So thanks so much. I'll see you next time.